The Hidden Treasure by St. Leonard of Port Maurice. Chapter 1, Sections 6 and 7. Are you astonished at hearing me call the Mass a stupendous work? If so, let me ask you, what can there be more stupendous than the effect produced by a few words pronounced by a simple priest? In fact, what tongue is there, angelic or human, that can adequately describe a power so measureless? Who can ever have imagined that the tongue of a man, which of itself has not power to lift a straw from the ground, would have been endowed by divine grace with a power, oh how stupendous, that can cause the Son of God to descend from heaven on earth? This power far excels that of being able to remove mountains, drain seas dry, or regulate the motions of planets. Nay, more, the possession of this power, to a certain extent, rivals that first fiat by which God created all things out of nothing, and in a certain sense, it seems to excel that other fiat by which the great Virgin attracted the eternal Word to her bosom. For she did nothing more than supply matter for Christ's body, which was formed from her most pure blood, but not by herself, that is, not by her own act, but entirely different, and wonderful beyond describing is the sacramental character in which the words of the priest, whom Christ employs as his instrument, reproduce him every time that he consecrates. Blessed John Buono of Mantua gave a singular illustration of this truth to a friend of his, a hermit, who was not able to comprehend how the words of a priest could be endowed with such a tremendous power as to be capable of changing the substance of bread into the body of Jesus Christ, and the substance of wine into his blood. Let me add, moreover, that this poor hermit unhappily consented to doubts which the devil suggested. The good servant of God, perceiving the man's error, brought him to a fountain, from which he took a vessel of water and gave it to him to drink. After he had drunk, he protested that he never before at any period of his life had tasted such a delicious wine. Hearing this, Blessed John Buono said, "Dear brother, does not this convince you of the marvelous truth? If God has been pleased to change the water into wine through the agency of such a creature as I am, how much the more readily should you believe that by virtue of the words pronounced by the priest, which are the words of God, the bread and the wine are converted into the substance of the body and blood of Christ? And who shall presume to limit God's omnipotence?" This singular illustration and the words of Blessed John dissipated every doubt from the mind of the hermit, who afterwards did great penance for his sin. A little faith, but a lively faith, will convince us that the ineffable excellences contained in this adorable sacrifice are beyond counting. Nor will we be surprised at seeing the miracle repeated over and over again at every hour and in every place, since the sacred humanity of Jesus Christ is endowed with a kind, if we may so speak, of immensity not granted to other bodies. This multiplied existence of our Lord in the sacrament was, as we are told, illustrated to an unbelieving Jew by an illiterate woman. The Jew was standing in the public street, where there was a great crowd, and among them the woman, at the very moment when a priest carrying the Holy Viaticum to a sick person made his appearance, followed by a large multitude. All the people knelt to adore the Holy Viaticum as it was borne along, but the Jew stirred not, nor did he offer any sign of reverence. Perceiving this, the woman, roused to indignation, arose, pulled the cap off the Jew's head, and gave him a cuff on the cheek, exclaiming at the same time, "Infidel, why do you not adore the true God in the divine sacrament?" "What true God?" said the Jew. "If the true God were there, it would follow that there must be an infinity of gods, since you assert that there is one on each of your altars any time that Mass is celebrated." Hearing this, the woman took a sieve, and placing it between the Jew's eyes and the sun, told him to look at the sun's rays through the apertures of this sieve. When he had done as she directed, she continued, "Tell me now, Jew, are there many suns, or only one, passing through the apertures of this sieve?" To which the Jew answered, "There is only one sun." "Then," replied the woman, "why do you wonder if God, made man and shrouded in the sacrament, though one, indivisible and unchanged, should, through the excess of love for us, present himself really and truly on different altars?" This was amply sufficient to convince the Jew, so much so that he was compelled to acknowledge the truth of our holy faith. O holy faith! A single ray of thy light is sufficient to enable the most illiterate to answer with fervor of spirit. O who will dare to set limits to God's omnipotence? So profoundly was Saint Teresa impressed with the idea of that omnipotence that she was accustomed to say, "The sublimer, deeper, and more abstruse the mysteries of our holy faith, the firmer and devouter is my belief, and the greater is my reverence for them." And indeed, she was justified in expressing herself thus, for she was thoroughly convinced that the omnipotence of God can effect still great wonders far above our feeble intelligence. Revive your faith, therefore, and acknowledge that this divine sacrifice is the miracle of miracles, the wonder of wonders, and that its highest excellence consists in its being incomprehensible to our limited understanding. Amazed at such marvelous goodness of our God, never cease repeating, O treasure inestimable, O treasure beyond all human comprehension. But lest its prodigious excellence should not awaken these sentiments in your soul, let the necessity of such a holy sacrifice inspire them. If there were no sun in the heavens, what would be the condition of this world? Alas, all would be darkness, sterility, and indescribable misery. And if we had not the Holy Mass, what would become of us? Oh, wretched indeed would our condition be, deprived of every good, overwhelmed with every evil, for we should then be, as it were, a target for the thunderbolt of God's anger. Some there are who seem astonished when they fancy that our good God has, in a certain sense, changed his mode of governing the world since the ancient times. For in the latter, he was wont to be called the God of armies, and he used to speak to the people out of the clouds and bolts of thunder in his hands, for indeed he punished crime with all the rigor of his justice. For one single adultery he put 25,000 of the tribe of Benjamin to the sword. For an act of vainglory committed by David in making a census of his kingdom, he sent a terrible plague, which in a very short time swept off 70,000 of the population. For one irreverent and incautious glance, he slew 50,000 of the Benjamites. And in these our times he tolerates not only vanities and frivolities, but adulteries the most sordid, scandals the most barefaced, nay, and the most frightful blasphemies which many Christians cast on his most holy name. How then do we account for all of this? Why, this difference in his mode of governing. Is it because our ingratitudes are more excusable than those of our predecessors? Quite the contrary. Indeed, for as we have received blessings far surpassing those that were conferred on the Jews in the old dispensation, so are we far more culpable than they. The holy sacrifice of the Mass is the true and sole reason of such stupendous clemency, for in it we offer to the Eternal Father the great victim, Jesus Christ. This is the sun of our holy Church, which dissipates the clouds and restores serenity to the heavens. This, indeed, is the celestial rainbow that stills the tempest of divine justice. For my own part, I am persuaded that if it were not for the Holy Mass, the world would have long since tottered from its foundations, crushed beneath the enormous weight of so many accumulated iniquities. The Mass is the ponderous and powerful supporter on which the world rests, which keeps it from falling into horrid chaos. Will not this reflection convince you of the necessity of this divine sacrifice? But as this alone is not enough, we must know how to turn to good account the blessings which it holds out to us. Wherefore, when assisting at the holy sacrifice, let us bear in mind a memorable fact recorded in the life of Alfonso Albuquerque, who, with his fleet, being overtaken by a terrible storm at sea which threatened him with certain death, had recourse to the following expedient. Taking a tender child that was at the moment aboard his ship and holding him up to heaven, he exclaimed, "If we are sinners, this innocent babe surely is free from sin. O Lord, for the sake of this sinless child, save us sinners from death." Would you believe it? God was so appeased by the sight of that pure infant that the storm was stilled, and the horror of impending death, which caused the sailors to weep and tremble, was turned into transports of joy. Now what think you does the Eternal Father when the priest, elevating the most holy victim of the altar, exhibits to him the innocence of his divine Son? Ah, surely his tender compassion cannot but be moved at sight of the immaculate innocence of Jesus, and surely that divine compassion must, in a certain sense, be constrained to still the fierce storms that assail us, nay, and to provide for our necessities. Ah, indeed, if it were not for this most holy victim, once offered for us on the cross, and now daily offered on our altars, we, one and all, might renounce all hope of heaven and look on hell as our final destination. Yes, assuredly, were it not for this ever blessed victim, hell should be our portion. But this treasure of the Holy Mass revives our hopes and encourages us to look for everlasting glory in that paradise which cannot be forfeited except by our own folly and sinfulness. If therefore it is the duty of a Christian to twine his heart's affections round our altars and to perfume them with incense and flowers of sweetest odor, it is still more necessary to honor them with purity and modesty, since they are, in fact, the mercy seat from which we derive all good. With joined hands, therefore, and hearts thrilling with holy love, let us thank the Eternal Father, who has so mercifully obliged us to offer to him this heavenly victim. But let us be still more thankful for the countless benefits we can draw from it, provided we make the offering in the spirit of true believers, and for the sublime ends for which he has bestowed this precious treasure upon us.